Don't cry, ma'am. You can borrow our dad to make you feel better.
The small voice cut through the December evening like a bell, clear and bright against the backdrop of Christmas music and children's laughter. And us too. We're really good at making people smile. Garrett Mitchell froze mid-step, his heart dropping into his stomach, as he watched his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, stand fearlessly in front of a crying stranger. Her twin sister Rose was already moving to join her, their small, mittened hands finding each other with that silent communication only twins possessed. They stood together beneath the old oak tree, wrapped in white Christmas lights, two tiny figures in matching pink coats facing a woman in red who sat completely alone while the world celebrated around her. Riverside Community Park had been transformed into a winter wonderland for the annual Christmas Eve festival. Thousands of lights twinkled from every tree and lamppost, casting dancing shadows across the fresh snow. The scent of roasted chestnuts drifted from a nearby vendor cart, mingling with the warm smell of hot apple cider and cinnamon. Families wandered through elaborate light displays, children shrieking with delight as they discovered new installations around every corner. Carolers in Victorian costumes sang Silent Night near the fountain, their voices rising in perfect harmony. But here in this quiet corner beneath the ancient oak, none of that joy seemed to reach. The woman on the bench looked up, and Garrett saw something that made his chest constrict painfully. Her face was streaked with tears that caught the Christmas lights like tiny diamonds. Mascara had smudged beneath her eyes, and her nose was red from crying in the cold. She was wearing a stunning red dress, clearly meant for a party with delicate straps that left her shoulders bare despite the freezing temperature. A thin wrap had slipped down her arms, forgotten in her grief. Her long blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders in soft waves, catching the white lights overhead like spun gold. She was beautiful, even in devastation. Maybe especially in devastation. Around her the world continued its celebration. A father hoisted his son onto his shoulders to see the giant Christmas tree. A couple walked hand in hand sharing a bag of candied almonds. 3 teenagers posed for selfies in front of a glowing reindeer display. But this woman sat in her own bubble of sorrow, invisible to everyone except 2 small girls who had decided she needed rescuing. Zuri Zara. Garrett's voice came out strangled as he hurried forward, snow crunching beneath his boots. Girls wait. But they weren't waiting. They never did when someone needed help. It was one of the things he loved most about them, and one of the things that terrified him. Their hearts were so open, so ready to embrace the world, that they had no concept of strangers or boundaries or the walls adults built to protect themselves. Lily had already reached the bench, her little face scrunched with concern. Rose stood slightly behind her sister, but her eyes were fixed on the crying woman with an intensity that belied her 6 years. These were his daughters, born from the greatest love he'd ever known, and the greatest loss he'd ever survived. The woman's expression shifted as she looked at the twins. Shock replaced despair, confusion melting into something softer as she took in these 2 identical faces with their father's brown eyes and their mother's determined chin. She wiped hastily at her cheeks with trembling hands, trying to compose herself. "I'm so sorry," Garrett gasped as he reached them, his breath forming clouds in the December air. Nobody should be sad. And alone at Christmas? Rose interrupted matter-of-factly, as if this explained everything. She nodded with the certainty that only children possessed. "So you can borrow us for a while?" The woman let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She looked at the twins, then up at Garrett, and he saw the moment her defenses cracked just slightly. There was something raw in her eyes, something broken that called to the broken places inside himself. "That's very sweet of you both," she whispered, her voice hoarse and fragile, like crystal that might shatter at any moment. "Really, I'm fine. I just needed a moment." But she wasn't fine. Anyone could see that. The way her hands trembled, the way her shoulders curved inward as if trying to protect her heart from further damage, the way her eyes held that hollow look of someone who had cried until there were no tears left, but couldn't seem to stop anyway. "I'm Lily," Lily announced, pointing to the tiny freckle near her left ear. "And this is Rose. That's how people tell us apart. Well, that and I talk more. Rose thinks more. Daddy says we balance each other out. I'm Garrett. Again, I apologize for my daughters. They have a tendency to adopt people. Vivian." The woman interrupted softly, extending a hand that felt ice-cold when Garrett gently shook it. "Vivian Cross. And please don't apologize. They're lovely. Vivian." The name suited her. Elegant, beautiful, broken. Before Garrett could respond, before he could apologize again or make excuses to leave, both girls climbed onto the bench on either side of Vivian, each taking one of her cold hands in their small mittened ones. "See, we're excellent at this," Lily declared, swinging Vivian's hand gently. "Sometimes people just need someone to sit with them. That's what Daddy says when we're sad." Rose leaned against Vivian's side, her warmth pressing against the woman's bare arm. "Your dress is really pretty, like a princess, but princesses shouldn't cry alone." Vivian stared down at the small hands holding hers, these tiny fingers that had reached out without hesitation or judgment. Her chest heaved with a breath that seemed to come from somewhere very deep, somewhere that had been locked away for a very long time. "You're very perceptive," she whispered. Garrett stood awkwardly in the snow, unsure what to do. Part of him wanted to gather his daughters and leave this woman to her grief, to not intrude on whatever private pain had brought her to this bench alone on Christmas Eve. But another part of him, the part that remembered what it felt like to sit in darkness and wish someone would see him, couldn't walk away. "We were going to get hot chocolate," Lily continued, swinging Vivian's hand with more enthusiasm. "You should come with us. The Copper Lantern makes the best hot chocolate in the whole world. They put extra whipped cream and candy canes in it." "I don't want to intrude on your family time," Vivian said quickly. "You're not," Garrett heard himself saying. The words surprised him, coming out before he could think better of them. "Besides, I learned long ago not to argue when these two team up. It's a losing battle." The smile that touched Vivian's lips was small, barely there, but it was genuine. It transformed her face for just a moment, letting him glimpse the woman beneath the grief. "Then thank you," she said softly. "I'd like that." As they walked toward the cafe, the twins positioned themselves on either side of Vivian, each holding one of her hands, as if afraid she might disappear if they let go. Garrett walked slightly behind, watching this strange tableau unfold. His daughters had found a wounded bird, and they were determined to help it fly again. He just hoped they knew what they were getting into. He hoped he knew what he was getting into. Because something told him this Christmas Eve was about to change everything. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. The Copper Lantern Cafe welcomed them with a wave of cinnamon-scented warmth that immediately began thawing Vivian's frozen limbs. The small cafe was decorated for Christmas, with twinkling lights wound around exposed wooden beams, fresh pine garlands draped over the windows, and a cheerful fire crackling in the stone fireplace. The rich smell of coffee and cocoa mingled with the sweetness of fresh-baked pastries. Mrs. Dorothy Chen, the elderly owner, with silver-streaked black hair and laugh lines that spoke of a lifetime of joy, looked up from behind the counter as they entered. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw Vivian, curiosity sparking in her expression, but she was too polite to comment. "Garrett girls, your usual corner booth is open," she called out warmly. "For tonight?" "Yes, please, Mrs. Dorothy," Lily announced. "This is our new friend Vivian. We found her at the park and she was sad, so we're making her feel better. Garrett wanted to sink through the floor. His daughters had absolutely no filter, but Mrs. Dorothy just smiled with that knowing warmth she always seemed to possess. Then she's in excellent hands, dear. The twins were already pulling Vivian toward their corner booth, the one with the best view of both the fireplace and the window, where they could watch the snow falling in the glow of the street lamps. They claimed the window seats, positioning Vivian between them with the practiced efficiency of hostesses who had been doing this their whole lives. Garrett slid into the opposite side of the booth, studying Vivian in the warm light of the cafe. Up close, he could see that her red dress was expensive designer, probably with delicate beading along the neckline that caught the light. Her makeup, what remained of it, had been expertly applied. She had dressed for something important tonight. A party, perhaps. A celebration she never made it to. Mrs. Dorothy appeared with a tray bearing 4 steaming mugs of hot chocolate each, topped with a mountain of whipped cream and a candy cane stirrer. She set them down with a wink at the girls, then disappeared without a word, somehow understanding that this moment needed privacy. Silence settled over the table as the twins attacked their hot chocolate with enthusiasm, immediately getting whipped cream on their noses. Garrett wrapped his hands around his mug, feeling the warmth seep into his cold fingers, and wondered what to say. "What did you say to a stranger your children had just collected, like a stray kitten?" Vivian spoke first. Her voice still rough, but steadier now in the warmth of the cafe. "You have beautiful daughters. Thank you." The words came out heavier than he intended, weighted with 3 years of being everything to them. "They're my world." Their eyes met across the table and something flickered in Vivian's gaze. Recognition. Understanding. The kind that only came from shared experience with loss. "I can see that," she said, softly. "Why were you crying, Miss Vivian?" Rose asked suddenly, looking up from her hot chocolate with whipped cream dotting her nose. "Did someone hurt your feelings?" Rose Garrett started ready to redirect, but Vivian held up a hand. "It's okay." She looked at the little girl carefully, seeming to weigh her words. "I was sad because Christmas makes me remember people I miss very much." "Like people who died?" Lily asked with the brutal honesty that only children possessed. Garrett's stomach dropped. "Girls that's not?" "Yes," Vivian said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like people who died." Both twins nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense to them. As if death was something they understood on a level no 6-year-old should have to understand. Rose reached across the table and patted Vivian's hand gently. "Our mummy died too. We were 3. We don't remember her much, but Daddy says she's in heaven watching over us." The air seemed to leave the cafe. Garrett sat, frozen, his heart pounding against his ribs. His daughters had just shared something he usually kept private, something he protected like a wound that had never fully healed, but they had offered it freely without hesitation because they recognized a kindred spirit. Vivian's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these were different from the ones she'd shed on the park bench. These were softer, tinged with something that looked almost like hope. "I'm so sorry. That must have been incredibly hard." It was Garrett, said, his voice rough. He didn't usually talk about Claire to strangers. Hell, he barely talked about her to people he'd known for years. But something about this moment, about this woman who understood loss, made the walls seem pointless. "It still is some days." "I lost my family too," Vivian said suddenly, the words tumbling out as if she couldn't hold them back any longer. She looked at the twins, something cracking open in her expression. "My parents and my brother and sister, all at once, 7 years ago. A car accident. All of them." Lily's eyes went wide. At the same time, Vivian nodded, pressing her lips together to hold back the tears that threatened to escape. "Yes, all of them. You must be very lonely." Rose said, her voice trembling with empathy that seemed too big for her small body. Then, without warning, she scrambled out of her seat and wrapped her small arms around Vivian's waist, pressing her face against the woman's side. Lily quickly followed, sandwiching Vivian from the other direction, their small bodies offering warmth and comfort with the simple directness of childhood. We know about lonely. Daddy gets lonely sometimes, too. Vivian held both girls close, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. For a long moment, no one spoke. They just sat there in the warm cafe, while Christmas music played softly overhead, two grieving children and one grieving woman holding each other like survivors of the same shipwreck who had finally found land. Garrett watched his own eyes burning and felt something shift in his chest. Something that had been frozen for 3 years began to thaw just slightly, like the first drops of spring meltwater. When Vivian finally pulled back, she wiped her eyes and let out a shaky laugh. "I'm sorry. I'm not usually this emotional. I don't know what's come over me." "Daddy says feelings aren't wrong," Lily informed her seriously. "They just are. Like weather. You can't control weather, so you just have to feel it and wait for it to pass." "Your daddy is very wise," Vivian said, looking at Garrett with wonder in her eyes. The conversation shifted, then the walls crumbling. They weren't strangers anymore. They were people who understood loss, who had walked through the same fire and somehow survived. That created a bond that didn't require small talk or pretense. "What do you do?" Garrett asked, genuinely curious about this woman who had appeared in their lives like a Christmas miracle. "I own a skincare company," Vivian said. "Natural products, sustainable practices. Started it 5 years ago, 2 years after I lost my family." She paused, stirring her hot chocolate absently. "It kept me busy. Maybe too busy. I threw myself into work because if I was working, I didn't have to think about how empty my apartment was, how there was no one to call when something good happened. Or bad." "I understand that," Garrett said softly. "After Melissa died, work became my safe place too. Engineering problems have solutions. Grief doesn't." "Exactly. People kept telling me time would heal it, but they were wrong. Time just makes you better at pretending. Until you're sitting alone on a park bench on Christmas Eve," Garrett said gently. "Until 2 little girls decide you need rescuing," Vivian corrected with a small smile. Rose looked up from her hot chocolate whipped cream, still decorating her nose. "Are you going to be alone tomorrow too? On Christmas?" The question hung heavy in the air. Vivian's smile faltered. "Yes, sweetie. Usually I work. Or watch movies. Try not to think about." She stopped, swallowing hard. "I try to get through the day." "That's not Christmas," Lily declared with the absolute certainty of a child who had never known anything but love. "Christmas is supposed to have people and presents and pancakes and too much wrapping paper everywhere." Garrett watched Vivian's face crumble slightly, watched her fight to hold herself together, and something in him shifted. The same something that had made him walk toward her in the park instead of away. The same something that had made him sit down at this table and let his daughters work their magic. But Lily beat him to it. "You should come to our house tomorrow," she announced. "We have presents, and Daddy makes snowman pancakes, and we watch movies all day." "Right, Daddy." Garrett met Vivian's eyes across the table. He saw hope there, mixed with fear and uncertainty. The face of a woman who had been alone for 7 years, being offered a lifeline she wasn't sure she deserved to grab. "They're right," he heard himself saying. "You shouldn't be alone tomorrow. Nothing fancy, just pancakes and chaos. But there'll be laughter. And you'd be very welcome." "I couldn't impose." Her voice cracked on the last word. "You're not imposing," Rose said firmly. "You're visiting. There's a difference." Vivian laughed then, a real laugh that broke through her tears like sunlight through clouds. She looked at Garrett, at the twins, at this strange and wonderful family that had scooped her up without hesitation. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes, thank you. I'd like that very much." They exchanged phone numbers while the girls finished their hot chocolate. When their fingers brushed during the exchange, both pulled back quickly, but not before Garrett felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Outside the cafe, the snow was falling harder now, blanketing the world in white. The Christmas lights reflected off the fresh powder, making everything glow with magic. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Garrett said. "I'll text you the address." Vivian nodded, clutching her thin wrap around her shoulders. The girls hugged her goodbye, making her promise twice that she would really, truly come. As she walked away toward the parking lot, her red dress a bright spot against the white snow, Garrett watched her go. His heart was doing something strange in his chest, something it hadn't done in a very long time. "I like her, Daddy," Lily said, slipping her mittened hand into his. "Me too," Rose agreed from his other side. "Yeah," Garrett murmured, watching Vivian's figure disappear into the snowy night. "Me too." Garrett woke at 5 in the morning, long before dawn had begun to lighten the December sky. Sleep had been elusive, his mind turning over the events of the previous evening like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. The image of Vivian on that park bench kept returning to him. The red dress, the tears, the way she had looked at his daughters like they were some kind of miracle. He lay in bed for a few minutes, listening to the quiet house. The old radiators ticked and groaned as they pumped heat through the rooms. Outside, the wind had died down, leaving behind a world muffled by fresh snow. He could hear the distant sound of a snowplow making its early morning rounds. Finally, he gave up on sleep and swung his legs out of bed. The hallway was dark as he padded toward the stairs, but he stopped at the small table near the landing where Claire's photograph stood. It had been there for 3 years, a simple silver frame holding the image of a woman with laughing brown eyes and a smile that could light up a room. She was holding the twins in this picture, one baby in each arm, looking at the camera with such pure joy that it still made his heart clench. Garrett stood before the photograph for a long moment, his bare feet cold on the hardwood floor. "I invited someone," he whispered to the silent image. "A woman. She's coming for Christmas." He paused, swallowing hard. "I hope that's okay. I hope you understand." Claire's eyes smiled back at him, unchanged, unchanging. She couldn't give him permission. She couldn't give him absolution. But somehow, standing here in the dark, he felt less guilty for feeling something he hadn't felt in years. He continued downstairs to the kitchen, moving quietly so as not to wake the girls. The coffee maker gurgled to life, and he stood at the window watching the sky slowly lighten from black to deep blue to the pale grey of a snowy Christmas morning. His mind drifted backward, as it always did in the quiet moments, to the beginning of everything. He had met Claire in college, both of them engineering students, both of them terrible at the social aspects of university life. They had bonded over a shared dislike of frat parties and a shared love of old movies and quiet evenings. She had been studying art history as a minor, and she could talk for hours about the brushwork of the Impressionists or the symbolism in Renaissance paintings. He had fallen in love with her mind first, then her laugh, then everything else about her. Their wedding had been small, held in her grandmother's garden on a perfect June afternoon. Claire had worn flowers in her hair and cried when she said her vows. He had fumbled the ring and made everyone laugh, and she had kissed him before the officiant told her to. That was Claire. Always ahead of the moment, always so full of life that the rules couldn't contain her. The pregnancy had been a surprise. Twins, the doctor had said, showing them the ultrasound. 2 heartbeats, 2 little lives growing inside his wife. Claire had laughed and cried and immediately started planning. 2 cribs, 2 car seats, 2 of everything. She painted the nursery herself, a mural of stars and moons and gentle animals that still covered the walls of the girls' room. Lily and Rose came into the world screaming 2 minutes apart, perfect and healthy, and so beautiful that Garrett had wept without shame. He remembered Claire holding them for the first time, one baby tucked in each arm, looking at him with tears streaming down her face. "We made these," she had whispered in wonder. "We made these perfect little humans." For 2 years they were happy. Exhausted, certainly. 2 babies meant twice the diapers, twice the midnight feedings, twice the crying that seemed to never end. But they were happy. Their family was complete. Then Claire started feeling tired. At first they attributed it to the demands of caring for toddler twins. Anyone would be exhausted. But the fatigue didn't lift. It got worse. And then came the pain, the weight loss, the doctor's appointments, that led to more appointments, that led to that terrible day in the oncologist's office. Ovarian cancer. Stage 3. Aggressive. Garrett remembered the way the doctor's words had seemed to come from very far away, like he was hearing them through water. He remembered Claire's hand going cold in his. He remembered thinking absurdly that they had just bought new curtains for the living room, and now they would never hang them. What followed were 18 months of war. Chemotherapy that left Claire weak and vomiting. Radiation that burned her skin and made her cry from the pain. Experimental treatments that cost their savings, and then some that required them to take out loans against the house that demanded everything they had, and then demanded more. Through it all, Claire fought. She fought with a ferocity that amazed everyone who knew her, including the doctors who had given her 6 months to live. She fought for her daughters, for the chance to see them grow up for more time. Just more time. But in the end, the cancer was stronger. Claire's final weeks had been peaceful, at least. Hospice care at home in the bedroom they had shared for years, with a view of the garden she loved. She had stopped the treatments by then, choosing quality over quantity. She wanted to be present for her family, not lost in a haze of medication and sickness. She had made Garrett promise things, to tell the girls about her, to keep her memory alive, to not wear black to her funeral because she hated how he looked in black. And she had made him promise one more thing. "Don't be alone forever." She had whispered, her hand fragile as bird bones in his. "Promise me. The girls need a father who knows how to be happy. You deserve to be happy again." He had promised, not believing he ever could. Claire died on a Tuesday afternoon in April, with sunlight streaming through the windows and the first spring flowers blooming in the garden. Garrett had been holding her hand when she took her last breath. The twins were asleep in the next room, too young to understand that their world was ending. The year after her death was a blur. He remembered it in fragments. Crying in the shower so the girls wouldn't hear. Burning dinner for the 10th night in a row. Spending hours online learning how to braid hair because Claire had always done it, and now there was no one else. His mother came to help, terrified that he would fall apart completely. She was probably right to worry. The worst moment came 6 months after Claire's death. He had been cleaning out the closet, a task he had put off for as long as possible, when he found one of her sweaters at the back. He had pressed it to his face, and her scent had hit him like a physical blow. Vanilla and honey. The smell of home. He had collapsed on the closet floor and sobbed until he couldn't breathe while the twins played in the living room with his mother, unaware that their father was breaking apart 20 feet away. But he hadn't stayed broken. He couldn't. 2 little girls needed him. 2 little girls who had already lost their mother were depending on him to be strong enough for all of them. So he had pulled himself together piece by piece. He had learned to cook. He had figured out the braids. He had found a rhythm of work and childcare and survival that got him through each day. Mrs. Dorothy at the cafe became a lifeline, letting him bring the girls in for hot chocolate when things got hard, never judging, never pitying, just being present. And slowly, agonizingly, he had learned to live again. But he hadn't let himself feel. Not really. He had dated a few times half-hearted attempts that went nowhere because he couldn't bring himself to open up, couldn't imagine letting someone else into the space Claire had left behind. Until last night. Until a woman in a red dress crying on a park bench had looked at his daughters like they were a miracle she didn't deserve. Garrett shook himself from his memories as he heard small feet padding on the floor above. The girls were awake. Moments later they came thundering down the stairs in their Christmas pajamas, their faces bright with excitement. "Daddy! Daddy, is Vivian really coming? Is she really?" Garrett crouched down to their level, gathering them in his arms. "Yes, babies. She's really coming. Is it time for pancakes yet?" Lily demanded. "Almost. Let me get the batter ready." He moved to the kitchen, the girls trailing behind, chattering about presents and whether Vivian would like her gift and whether she had a favorite movie. Garrett listened with half an ear while he assembled ingredients for snowman pancakes, the one dish he had mastered in his 3 years as a single father. At 9:45, the doorbell rang. Both girls shrieked and raced for the door, nearly trampling each other in their haste. Garrett followed more slowly, his heart beating faster than he wanted to admit. When he opened the door, Vivian stood on his porch in jeans and a soft, cream-colored sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked different from last night, softer, somehow more vulnerable without the armor of her elegant dress. She was holding a small bag of wrapped gifts and looking at him with an expression that mixed hope with terror. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi," he replied. And then the girls grabbed her hands and pulled her inside before either adult could say another word. Christmas morning unfolded in a chaos of wrapping paper and laughter that Vivian hadn't experienced in 7 years. The girls tore into their presents with abandoned joy, shrieking over each new discovery, immediately sharing everything with Vivian, as if she had always been part of their traditions. She had brought them gifts, simple things she had picked up that morning from the only pharmacy open on Christmas Day. Coloring books, fancy hair clips, a package of glitter stickers. The girls acted as though she had given them treasure, hugging her so hard she nearly fell over. But it was the way they included her that broke something open in Vivian's chest. Every present had to be shown to her. Every new toy had to be demonstrated. Every ornament and decoration was explained with serious attention, as if these were matters of great importance that she needed to understand. She watched it all with a hunger she hadn't known she still possessed. This was what family looked like. This was what she had lost. This was what she had convinced herself she would never have again. After the presents were opened and the living room was buried in discarded wrapping paper, the girls settled in front of the TV with a Christmas movie while Garrett cleaned up. Vivian found herself in the kitchen helping without being asked, needing something to do with her hands. For a while they worked in comfortable silence, gathering paper and ribbons, stacking presents neatly by the tree. But eventually Garrett turned to her. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked softly. "Last night, I mean." "You don't have to, but I'm here if you want to." Vivian stopped a piece of red ribbon dangling from her fingers. Through the doorway she could hear the twins giggling at the movie. The house smelled like pine and cinnamon and the faint sweetness of the pancake syrup. It smelled like home. She took a deep breath. "My family was everything to me." She began, her voice barely above a whisper. "My parents, Robert and Catherine, my older brother Michael, my younger sister Sophie. We were close in a way I've never seen in other families. Sunday dinners every week, no matter what. Game nights, vacations together even after Michael and I were adults." Garrett had stopped cleaning, giving her his full attention. His eyes held no pity, just understanding. 7 years ago, the week before Christmas, we had a plan. My grandmother was spending the holiday with us, but she lived about 2 hours away. My parents and Michael and Sophie were going to drive out and pick her up, bring her back for Christmas Eve dinner. Vivian's hands were shaking now, the ribbon trembling. I was supposed to go with them, but I had been baking all day and I wanted to finish. I told them I'd stay and have everything ready when they got back. She closed her eyes, and she was 25 again, standing in her parents' kitchen with flour on her hands and a batch of sugar cookies cooling on the counter. The house had smelled like vanilla and Christmas. She had been happy. I was frosting cookies when the police knocked on the door. The words came out flat, drained of emotion. She had told this story so many times in the first years to doctors and therapists and the few friends who tried to help. Now it was just history, just the worst moment of her life reduced to a few sentences. Multi-car pile-up on the highway. A drunk driver crossed the median doing 90 miles an hour, hit them head-on. She heard Garrett's sharp intake of breath, but couldn't look at him. My parents were killed instantly. Michael held on for a few hours, but the injuries were too severe. Sophie. Her voice broke. Sophie was 18. She was starting college in the fall. She was so excited about her future. Vivian. Garrett's voice was gentle, so gentle it made her tears spill over. My grandmother had a stroke when she heard. She never recovered. She died 2 weeks later. The ribbon finally slipped from her fingers, falling to the floor like a red wound against the hardwood. I buried my entire family in the span of 3 weeks. My parents, my brother, my sister, my grandmother, everyone who had ever loved me. Gone. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. In the living room, the twins laughed at something in the movie, the sound bright and innocent. The sound of children who didn't know yet how cruel the world could be. I didn't eat for a week after the funerals, Vivian continued quietly. My aunt had to make all the arrangements because I couldn't function. I couldn't go into my parents' house, couldn't look at photos. Everything reminded me of them, and everything reminded me that I should have been in that car. Survivor's guilt, Garrett murmured. Yes. She finally looked at him. I stayed home to frost cookies, and that decision saved my life and destroyed it at the same time. He crossed the kitchen slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he took her hands in his. They were warm and steady, an anchor in the storm of memory. The company, she said, looking at their joined hands. Sophie's Garden. I named it after my sister. She loved flowers, had this whole plan to become a botanist. My mother used to make homemade lotions and salves. I took her recipes and turned them into a business because it was the only way I could keep them alive. If I was working, if I was busy, I didn't have to feel the emptiness. I understand, Garrett said, and the remarkable thing was, she knew he did. After Claire died, work was the only place I felt normal. Engineering has rules. Problems have solutions. Grief doesn't follow any rules, I know. Yesterday, Vivian whispered, was 7 years exactly since the accident. I was supposed to go to my company's Christmas party. I got dressed, drove to the venue, sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. She laughed bitterly. I couldn't make myself go inside. All those people celebrating, and I was supposed to smile and toast the success of a company I built from the ashes of my family. So you went to the park. I used to go there as a child with my parents. We'd walk through the Christmas lights every year. It was tradition. She swallowed hard. I sat on that bench and let myself cry for the first time in months. I'd been sitting there for 3 hours when your daughters found me. Garrett squeezed her hands. I'm glad they did. Me too. She met his eyes and something passed between them. Understanding. Recognition. 2 people who had been shattered and had somehow put themselves back together, piece by broken piece. Claire would have liked you, Garrett said softly. She always said the strongest people were the ones who had been broken and rebuilt. What was she like? He smiled. The expression tinged with sadness and love. She was light. Pure, radiant light. She could walk into a room and everyone would feel happier just because she was there. She painted, did you know that the mural in the girls' room is hers? Stars and moons and gentle animals. He paused. She made me promise before she died that I wouldn't be alone forever, that I'd let myself be happy again. Have you kept that promise? I've been trying. But it's hard. He looked at her with such openness that it took her breath away. You're the first person who's made me feel like maybe I could. Before Vivian could respond, two small voices interrupted from the doorway. Daddy, the movie's over. Can Vivian read us a story now? They both laughed, the heavy moment broken by the eternal demands of children. Vivian wiped her eyes quickly, composing herself. I'd love to read you a story. What book? The twins exchanged a look and came back moments later with a worn copy of The Velveteen Rabbit. Vivian's heart clenched. It had been her mother's favorite book. She settled on the couch with a girl on each side, their warm bodies pressing against her as she opened the familiar pages. Her voice wavered as she read about becoming real through love, about how love makes you authentic even when it breaks you down. When she finished, both girls were quiet. That's my favorite part, Lily said softly. When the bunny becomes real because the boy loved him so much. It's a beautiful book, Vivian managed around the lump in her throat. Later, when the afternoon had faded into early evening and it was time to go, Garrett walked her to her car. The snow had started again, light flakes drifting down like blessing. Thank you, Vivian said, turning to face him on the doorstep. You gave me the first real Christmas in 7 years. Thank you for coming, for trusting us with your story. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. The porch light caught the snowflakes in Vivian's hair like tiny stars. Can I see you again? Garrett asked quietly. Not because my daughters volunteered my services, because I want to. Vivian felt something warm bloom in her chest, something that had been frozen for 7 years beginning to thaw. I'd like that. Their hands touched, lingered. Neither wanted to break the moment. Finally, Vivian stepped back, got into her car and drove away into the snowy evening. In her rearview mirror, she could see Garrett still standing on the porch, watching her go. The twins pressed against the window behind him, waving furiously. She waved back, tears streaming down her face. But for the first time in 7 years, they weren't tears of grief. 2 days after Christmas, Garrett found himself pacing his living room at 8 in the evening, phone in hand, trying to convince himself that it wasn't too soon to call. The girls were asleep, exhausted from a day of playing with their new toys and video calling their grandparents. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak of old wood settling and the distant sound of wind against the windows. He had been thinking about Vivian constantly since she drove away on Christmas evening. The way she had opened up to him in the kitchen, sharing her story with a vulnerability that had broken through every wall he'd built. The way she had read to his daughters with tears shimmering in her eyes. The way she had looked at him on the porch like he was something precious and terrifying all at once. Finally, he stopped pacing and hit dial. She answered on the second ring. Garrett, hi. Brilliant opening, he thought. Very smooth. I hope I'm not calling too late. No, not at all. I was just reading and thinking about... She paused. Well, thinking about you all, actually. Something warm spread through his chest. The girls have been asking when they can see you again. Lily has a drawing she made for you. Rose picked out a book she thinks you'd like. Vivian laughed softly, and the sound did something to Garrett's heart that he hadn't felt in years. That's incredibly sweet. I've been thinking about them too. About all of you. They talked for 3 hours that night. About everything and nothing. He learned that she loved old movies, especially anything with Audrey Hepburn, that she hated cilantro with a passion that bordered on irrational, that she read biographies of extraordinary people because their stories gave her hope that ordinary people could do remarkable things. She learned that he built bridges for a living, literally as a civil engineer who specialized in structural integrity, that he was terrible at laundry and had turned more than one load of the girls' clothes pink, that he sang off-key in the car and the girls had started critiquing his performances. When they finally hung up, Garrett realized he was smiling. Actually smiling. He couldn't remember the last time a phone call had left him feeling this way. The next morning he sent her a good morning text. She responded within minutes. By the end of the week, the texting had become constant. She sent him photos of products she was developing at Sophie's garden, colorful bottles and jars with elegant labels. He sent her photos of his pancake disasters, documenting each failed attempt with self-deprecating captions. The girls drew pictures for her almost daily, elaborate crayon scenes of family outings they wanted to take together. Garrett photographed each one and sent them to Vivian, who responded with heart emojis and promises to frame them. 2 weeks after Christmas, Garrett finally worked up the courage to ask her to dinner. Just the two of them. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was more than happy to watch the girls for an evening. The restaurant was a small Italian place with red checkered tablecloths and candles dripping wax onto empty wine bottles. Not fancy, but intimate. The kind of place where you could actually hear your companion speak. They sat across from each other, nervous energy crackling between them. "This feels strange," Vivian admitted, twirling her pasta around her fork. Most couples share their deepest trauma on date 10, not date 1. Garrett laughed, the sound surprising him. "We did kind of skip the small talk phase. I know your worst fear already. You know mine. It's oddly freeing. Like meeting someone after the apocalypse," he agreed. "The pretense seems pointless when you've already seen each other at rock bottom." She told him about her company that night, really told him. How she had built it from nothing, working 18-hour days because stopping meant thinking. How success had come faster than she expected, but had left her emptier than she anticipated. How lonely it was at the top when there was no one to share the victories with. He told her about engineering, about the satisfaction of building something that would outlast him. About the bridge he was currently working on, a pedestrian crossing over a river that would connect two neighborhoods that had been divided for decades. About how he saw his work as making connections literally and figuratively. They closed down the restaurant, not realizing how late it had gotten until the waiter politely mentioned they were the last customers. Outside, snow was falling again, and the streets were hushed and beautiful. Garrett walked her to her car, his hand brushing hers in the cold. "I want to kiss you," he said quietly. "But I also want to do this right. Not rush it." Vivian squeezed his hand. "This was perfect. We have time." And they did. The next weekend, Vivian came for dinner at the house. The twins had prepared for her arrival like she was visiting royalty. They cleaned their room without being asked. They made welcome signs with markers and glitter. They argued for 20 minutes about which movie they should watch with her. When Vivian walked through the door carrying fancy cupcakes from a bakery downtown, both girls tackled her with hugs that nearly knocked her over. Dinner was spaghetti, one of the few dishes Garrett had mastered beyond pancakes. They ate at the kitchen table, the girls chattering non-stop. Vivian listening with genuine interest to every story about school and friends and the neighborhood cat that kept appearing in their backyard. After dinner, Vivian helped with homework. Rose was struggling with multiplication, and Vivian explained it in a way that suddenly made sense, using cupcakes as examples. When Rose finally got the answer right, she threw her arms around Vivian's neck. "You're a better teacher than Daddy," she declared. "Hey!" Garrett protested with mock offense. Lily patted his arm consolingly. "It's okay, Daddy. You're good at other things. Like making pancakes shaped kind of like snowmen." "Kind of like snowmen." "They're getting better," Lily assured him. Later, after the girls had gone to bed, Garrett and Vivian sat on the couch with the last of the wine. "They adore you," he said softly. "The feeling is mutual." Vivian smiled, but there was something wistful in her expression. "I never thought I'd feel like this again. Like I'm part of something. You are part of something. You're part of us." She looked at him, her eyes shimmering in the lamplight. "Is this really happening? It feels too good to be real." Garrett took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "It's real. We're real." The weeks that followed had a rhythm that felt like coming home. Vivian joined them for dinner twice a week, then 3 times. She learned that Lily loved drawing more than anything else and brought her a set of professional-grade colored pencils that the girl treated like sacred objects. She discovered that Rose was a voracious reader, far above her grade level, and started bringing her chapter books that challenged and delighted her. One Saturday, Garrett decided to teach Vivian to make his almost famous snowman pancakes. It did not go well. "You're not flipping it right," he said, standing behind her at the stove. "I'm flipping it exactly like you showed me. No, you're turning your wrist too much. It's more of a—" The pancake flew out of the pan and landed on the floor. The girls watching from the breakfast table erupted in laughter. "I think your wrist turned too much," Lily observed sagely. What followed was a flour fight that left all 4 of them covered in white powder, laughing until their sides hurt. Vivian had flour in her blonde hair and was wearing a bright smile that made Garrett's heart stutter. She stayed late that night, later than usual. The girls had gone to bed, and they were watching a movie that neither of them was really paying attention to. Somewhere around the halfway mark, Vivian fell asleep against his shoulder. Garrett sat very still, not wanting to disturb her. She looked peaceful in sleep, the tension lines around her eyes smoothed away, her breathing soft and even. He pulled a blanket over them both and let himself just exist in this moment. This, he thought, this is what I've been missing. A few weeks later, Vivian invited them to tour Sophie's garden. The company headquarters was in a converted warehouse on the edge of downtown, all exposed brick and high windows, and the pleasant scent of lavender and rose. The twins were fascinated by everything. The mixing stations where raw ingredients became lotions, the labeling machines that put pretty stickers on jars, the temperature-controlled rooms where products were tested for quality. But Garrett was watching Vivian. Here in her domain, she was different. Confident. Commanding. Her employees clearly respected and adored her, greeting her warmly, asking her opinion on formulations, sharing small victories and concerns. "She's amazing," said a young woman who introduced herself as Vivian's assistant. "We've never seen her this happy, though. Whatever's changed in her life, it's changed her." The first kiss came 3 months in. It was a Friday evening after the girls had gone to bed. Garrett and Vivian were sitting on his back porch, wrapped in blankets against the March chill, watching the last traces of winter slowly surrender to spring. "What are we doing?" Vivian asked quietly. Garrett turned to look at her. The porch light caught the gold in her hair, the uncertain hope in her eyes. "What do you mean, this? Us? What is this becoming?" He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I didn't think I'd feel this way again," he admitted finally. "After Claire, I thought that door had closed, that I'd had my one chance at love, and it was over." Vivian nodded, her eyes glistening. "I was afraid to want anything. Wanting means the possibility of losing, and I've already lost so much." Garrett reached over, cupping her face with hands still cold from the evening air. She didn't pull away. Her breath hitched her eyes, searching his. Maybe, he said softly, being afraid together is better than being safe alone. He kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, 2 wounded people, testing whether they could bear to be vulnerable again. Then she kissed him back, and it deepened into something more. Her hands fisted in his jacket, his fingers tangled in her hair. 3 years of loneliness and 7 years of grief met and merged and became something new. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying. Good tears, Garrett asked, echoing her words from their first meeting. Vivian laughed through her sobs. The best kind. A month later, on an ordinary Tuesday evening, he told her he loved her. They were washing dishes after dinner, the girls doing homework at the kitchen table. It wasn't a special moment. There was no candlelight, no romantic music. Just hot water and dish soap and the comfortable domesticity of a family going through their evening routine. Garrett handed Vivian a wet plate. Their fingers touched. "I love you," he said. The words came out without planning, without fanfare. They were simply true. Vivian froze the plate suspended in her hands. For a horrible moment, Garrett thought he had ruined everything. Too soon. Too much. Too... She set the plate down carefully on the counter, turned to face him. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been terrified to say it." He kissed her then, right there in the kitchen, with soapy hands and the sound of the girls' pencils scratching on paper in the background. Finally. Lily's voice came from the doorway. "Rose, they're kissing. I told you it would happen soon." Both girls ran into the kitchen, wrapping themselves around Garrett and Vivian's legs, turning the kiss into a group hug that knocked everyone slightly off balance. "Does this mean Vivian's our girlfriend now?" Rose asked. "That's not how it works," Lily informed her sister. "She's Daddy's girlfriend. We're just bonus." Vivian knelt down, gathering both girls close. "You're not bonus. You're the main event." The months that followed were a study in gradual integration. Vivian started keeping things at Garrett's house. First, a toothbrush tucked into the holder next to the girls' sparkly ones, then a change of clothes, then her favorite coffee mug, the one with the chip on the handle that she refused to throw away because her mother had given it to her. She was there more nights than she wasn't. The girls started asking for her specifically when they needed something. "Vivian, can you braid my hair? Daddy makes it too tight." "Vivian, can you help me with my book report? You explain things better." "Vivian, can you read the bedtime story tonight? You do all the voices." The first time they called her in the middle of the night, Garrett's heart nearly stopped. It was 2 a.m. when Rose's screams echoed through the house. Night terror, the kind she had been having since Claire's death, less frequent now, but still devastating when they came. Garrett bolted upright, but Vivian was already moving her instincts faster than his sleep-fogged brain. She was in the girls' room before he had even gotten out of bed. When he reached the doorway, he saw her sitting on Rose's bed. The little girl clutched in her arms, rocking gently, while singing a soft lullaby. Rose's screams had faded to whimpers, and her small hands fisted in Vivian's pajama top. Garrett stood in the doorway watching this woman who had stumbled into their lives comfort his daughter with such natural tenderness that it took his breath away. An hour later, Rose was asleep again, and Vivian was still there, stroking her hair, refusing to leave until she was sure the nightmare wouldn't return. "You're amazing, Garrett," whispered from the doorway. Vivian looked up at him, her eyes soft. She needed someone. I was here. As if it were that simple. As if loving his children was the most natural thing in the world. One evening, the girls decided it was time to show Vivian their mummy box. Garrett's throat tightened when they brought it out, a decorated shoebox they had covered with stickers and glitter, containing the few physical remnants of Claire that they treasured most. Inside was Claire's wedding ring, which Garrett had given them on the first anniversary of her death. A small bottle of her perfume that they sometimes asked to smell when they missed her. A stack of photographs. And the letter. Claire had written to each of them before she died letters for their birthdays, and graduations letters full of love and wisdom and the things she wouldn't be there to say in person. The girls had one letter to share between them, saved for their 18th birthday. They weren't ready to read it yet, but they looked at the envelope, sometimes touched Claire's handwriting, like it was something sacred. Vivian handled everything with reverence. She looked at each photograph, asked about each memory, never trying to replace or compete with Claire's place in their hearts. She simply honored. She was beautiful, Vivian said softly, looking at a picture of Claire in her wedding dress. She was, Garrett agreed, his voice rough. We want to plant roses for her, Lily announced suddenly. She loved roses. That's why we're named Rose and Lily. Well, Lily for lilies and Rose for roses. Mummy loved both. Vivian looked at the girls, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I think that's a beautiful idea. That weekend, all 4 of them went to the nursery and picked out rose bushes. They planted them in the backyard in the spot that got the best afternoon sun. Vivian knelt in the dirt beside the girls, helping them dig holes and arrange roots, getting soil under her fingernails, and not caring at all. There, Rose said when they finished surveying their work. Now Mommy has a garden. Garrett stood back, watching his daughters and the woman he loved tend to flowers that would bloom in memory of the woman he had lost. His heart was so full, it ached. Then came Mother's Day. The girls came home from school in tears, devastating sobs that took 20 minutes to calm down enough to explain. There's a Mother's Day tea at school, Lily finally managed between hiccups. Everyone's mum is coming. Everyone except us. Mrs. Patterson said we could bring a grandmother or Aunt Rose, added, her voice breaking. But we want someone who's really ours. Garrett felt his heart shatter. He usually asked his own mother to come to these events, but she lived 3 hours away and couldn't always make it. Before he could offer solutions, Lily looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. Could Vivian come instead? The question hung in the air. Garrett struggled with it, his mind racing through the implications. Was it too soon? Was it fair to Claire's memory to have another woman represent their family at an event meant to honor mothers? That night, he called his mother. Honey, she said. When he explained the situation, her voice warm with wisdom earned over 70 years of living. Claire would want those girls to have someone. She made you promise not to be alone forever. Do you think she'd want them to be alone at a Mother's Day tea? But it feels like moving on. And that's scary. But it's not betraying Claire's memory. It's honoring the life she wanted for all of you. When Garrett asked Vivian, she cried. You want me there? She whispered, her voice cracking. As someone who... They asked for you specifically. They want you there. The Mother's Day tea was held in the school cafeteria, decorated with tissue paper flowers and construction paper hearts. Tables were set with tiny cups and plates, and each student had made a card for their special guest. Vivian arrived nervous, wearing a flowered dress that somehow seemed both appropriate and completely her. The twins were waiting at the door, bouncing with excitement. You came, Rose shrieked, grabbing her hand. Of course I came. They led her to their table, positioned between other mothers who chatted about PTA meetings and soccer schedules. Vivian sat in the tiny chair, accepted the weak tea poured from a plastic teapot, and admired every single thing the girls showed her. The card was what broke her. Zara had made it herself, construction paper folded unevenly, decorated with stickers and careful crayon lettering. Thank you for being my extra love. Vivian pressed it to her chest, tears streaming down her face, not caring who saw. Around them, biological mothers went about their tea parties, women who had never known the particular pain of losing everyone or the particular joy of being chosen by children who had every right to close their hearts but hadn't. Walking out afterward, Rose held Vivian's hand tightly. I'm really glad you came. Me too, sweetheart. Vivian managed around the lump in her throat. More than you know. In the car on the way home, Garrett caught Vivian's eye in the rearview mirror. What he saw there, the love, the gratitude, the sense of finally belonging somewhere, made his decision firm. It was time. 6 months into the relationship, Garrett woke from a dream about Claire. She had been standing in their old kitchen, the one from the house they'd lived in before the cancer, before everything changed. She was making pancakes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, humming a song he couldn't quite place. When she turned to look at him, her eyes were sad. "Did you forget me already?" she asked. He woke, gasping, guilt crushing his chest like a physical weight. For days afterward he was different, quieter, more distant. He found himself staring at Claire's photograph in the hallway, carrying on silent conversations that felt like confessions. Vivian noticed. Of course she noticed. She noticed everything. "What's wrong?" she asked one evening after the girls had gone to bed, and they were supposed to be watching a movie, but Garrett hadn't registered a single scene. "Nothing," he said automatically. She didn't push, but he saw the hurt in her eyes, the uncertainty that crept in around the edges. She was pulling back, giving him space, and that distance only made him feel worse. The anniversary of Claire's death arrived on a cold Tuesday in April. Garrett went to the cemetery alone. He hadn't been since he started dating Vivian, he realized with a fresh wave of guilt. 3 years of weekly visits, and then he had just stopped. Claire's headstone was simple white marble with her name, the dates of her too short life, and the words, "Beloved wife and mother," carved beneath. Someone, probably his mother, had left flowers recently. The daffodils were still fresh. Garrett sank to his knees in the damp grass. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to fall in love again." The wind stirred the trees around him. A bird sang somewhere nearby, oblivious to his grief. "But I did. I fell in love with her Claire. And I don't know if that's okay. I don't know if you'd be happy for me or—" He pressed his forehead against the cold stone. "You made me promise. That last night, you made me promise not to be alone forever. You made me promise to be happy. But this feels like betraying you, like erasing you, like replacing you." Tears streamed down his face, cold in the April air. "The girls love her. They're happy. Happier than they've been since you died. Is that okay? Is it okay that someone else is making them smile? Is it okay that I'm smiling again?" He stayed there for hours, crying and talking and remembering Claire's laugh and the way she danced in the kitchen and the fierce look in her eyes when she held their newborn daughters for the first time. Remembering her courage through the treatment, her grace through the dying, her love that never wavered even when her body failed. Finally exhausted, he got up. He drove straight to Vivian's apartment. She opened the door in yoga pants and an old sweater, her hair pulled back, her face bare of makeup. She looked at him red-eyed and wrung out and simply stepped aside to let him in. "It's Claire's anniversary," he said, sinking onto her couch. 3 years today. Vivian sat beside him, close but not touching, giving him space to say what he needed to say. "I've been pulling away. I know you've noticed. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize for grieving. It's not just grief." He looked at her, this woman who had become essential to his happiness. "It's guilt. I feel guilty for loving you, for being happy, for moving on." "Oh, Garrett." Her voice was soft with understanding. "That's not moving on. That's moving forward. There's a difference." "Is there?" She took his hands then, threading her fingers through his. "Loving me doesn't mean you love her less. Hearts don't work that way. They expand, they don't replace." The words were so simple, so true, that something in Garrett's chest finally loosened. "She made me promise," he said. "Before she died, she made me promise to be happy again. Then be happy. Honor her memory by living the life she wanted for you." He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her shoulder, letting himself cry in a way he hadn't since those first terrible months. She held him through it, stroking his hair, saying nothing, just being present. When the tears finally subsided, he pulled back and looked at her. "I want to tell you about her. Really tell you. Not as a ghost between us, but as someone who mattered. Someone who's part of my story. Part of who I am. I'd like that." They talked all night. About Claire's laugh and her terrible cooking. About her paintings and her devotion to the girls. About her courage in the face of death. And the letters she wrote, that the girls were still too young to read. And Vivian listened. She didn't compete or compare. She simply received the stories like gifts, honoring the woman who came before her by cherishing the family that woman had left behind. Near dawn, as light began to creep through the windows, Vivian shared her own guilt. "I stayed home to bake cookies," she said quietly. "While my family drove to their deaths, I was frosting sugar cookies in my mother's kitchen. For 7 years, I've wondered if I could have done something. If I'd been in that car, would I have seen the danger coming? Could I have warned them?" "You couldn't have saved them. I know that. Logically. But guilt doesn't operate on logic." They sat in the morning light, two people who had spent years carrying weights they didn't need to carry. And in sharing them, something shifted. They made a pact that morning. They would talk about Claire and Vivian's family openly. They would honor the dead by living fully. They would stop letting guilt poison the happiness they were building. It wasn't easy. But it was a beginning. The health scare came in October, 8 months after they'd started dating. Lily woke up with a fever that wouldn't break. 103 degrees, then 104. Her face was flushed, her eyes glassy, her small body alternating between burning up and shaking with chills. The emergency room at 2 in the morning was a blur of fluorescent lights and worried faces. Garrett carried Lily in his arms, while Rose clung to Vivian's hand, both of them terrified in the way children are when they don't understand what's happening. The diagnosis came hours later. Severe flu complicated by the beginning of a secondary infection. Lily needed IV antibiotics and monitoring, but she would be fine. She would recover. But something in Vivian shattered that night in the hospital. She watched Lily small and pale in the hospital bed, and her mind flooded with images of other hospitals. The one where she'd waited for news about her family. The cold, sterile halls she'd walked alone, hoping against hope, before the doctor came with the worst news of her life. She made it through the hospital stay. She held Rose when the girl cried, brought Garrett coffee from the cafeteria, sat at Lily's bedside and read stories until the little girl fell asleep. She held it together because they needed her. But when Lily came home when the crisis had passed, and everything was supposed to go back to normal, Vivian fell apart. She started making excuses. Work was busy. She had meetings. The company needed her attention. She stopped coming for dinner, stopped texting first, stopped spending nights at Garrett's house. He noticed immediately, of course. He gave her space at first, thinking she needed time to process the scare. But when a week passed and she was still distant, he confronted her gently. "What's happening?" he asked during a phone call that felt strained and wrong. "Whatever it is, we can talk about it." For a long moment, Vivian was silent. "I can't do this," she finally whispered. "I can't love people this much again. Vivian. Everyone I've ever loved has died, Garrett. Everyone." And watching Lily in that hospital, seeing her so sick and scared, all I could think was, what if I lose them too? What if I lose you? What if I lose the girls? I know it's not rational. I know. But I can't make my heart understand that. The fear is bigger than the love, and I don't know how to make it stop. The words hung between them like a verdict. I think Vivian said, her voice breaking, "We should take a break. I need to figure out if I can do this. if I can be brave enough to risk losing again. Garrett felt like she had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart until it stopped beating. Is that really what you want? No. She was crying now. He could hear it. But I don't know what else to do. I'm so scared, Garrett. I'm so scared of loving you. He let her go, not because he wanted to, but because he understood that sometimes people needed to find their own way back to courage. Pushing would only make her run further. The week that followed was the longest of Garrett's life. The girls didn't understand. They kept asking for Vivian, kept wondering when she was coming back, kept looking at him with confused, hurt eyes that broke his heart. Did she stop loving us? Rose asked one night at bedtime, her voice small and scared. No, baby. She loves you very much. She's just scared right now. Scared of what? How did you explain to a 6-year-old that love and loss were so intertwined that sometimes people couldn't separate them? That the bravest act in the world was choosing to love again after being destroyed by grief? Scared of how much she loves us, Garrett said finally. Sometimes when you love people a lot, you get scared of losing them. Lily sat up in her bed, her face determined. Then we have to tell her she doesn't have to be scared. We're not going anywhere. Yeah, Rose agreed. We should make her feel brave again. Garrett looked at his daughters. These two small people who had lost their mother before they could even remember her properly, and felt a surge of pride so strong it nearly knocked him over. You're right, he said. We should. The plan was the twins' idea. Take us to the park, Lily said the next morning over breakfast. The one where we found Vivian. We need to talk to you there. Garrett drove them to the same oak tree, the same bench, the spot where everything had begun nearly a year ago. The Christmas lights were long gone, but the tree was full of autumn leaves now red and gold and orange against a grey October sky. They sat on the bench together, Garrett in the middle with a daughter on each side. Daddy Rose said seriously, You need to fight for her. She's scared, Lily added. But we were scared too after Mommy died. Remember, we were scared all the time. Garrett remembered. The nightmares, the tears, the way they had clung to him those first months, afraid to let him out of their sight. But we didn't stop loving you, Rose continued. Even though we were scared, we still loved you. Because love is scarier when you don't do it. Love is scarier when you don't do it. Garrett stared at his daughter, 6 years old, and already wiser than half the adults he knew. Vivian is scared because she loves us, Lily said. That's not bad. That's good. It means we matter. You need to tell her that. And Rose added with the practical determination she had inherited from her mother, we made her a video. You need to show it to her. They had made it themselves using Garrett's phone and the skills they'd learned from making video calls with their grandparents. It was shaky and imperfect, and absolutely devastating. Garrett drove to Vivian's apartment that afternoon. She answered the door looking terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, hair unwashed, wearing pajamas at 3 in the afternoon. She had clearly been crying. Garrett, she started. I don't think. Please, he said quietly. Just watch something. Then, if you still want me to go, I'll go. She hesitated, then stepped aside. He sat beside her on her couch and pulled up the video on his phone. The screen showed Lily and Rose sitting on Lily's bed, their faces serious. Hi, Vivian, Lily said, waving at the camera. We miss you really much. We know you're scared. Rose added, because people you love go away sometimes. Our mummy went away, Lily continued. And it was really sad. We cried a lot, but we still love Daddy. Rose's voice was fierce. And we love you too. Please don't go away, Lily said, her eyes filling with tears on screen. We promise to be extra good. Rose was crying now, too. You make Daddy smile. And you make us feel like we have someone, too. Like a mom who's here. Both girls looked at each other, then back at the camera. We love you, Vivian, they said together. Please come back. The video ended. Vivian was sobbing, her hands pressed against her mouth as if trying to hold in the sound. She watched the video again. And then a third time. How did I almost walk away from this, she finally managed. Garrett took her hands. Fear makes us do stupid things. I know. I almost didn't invite you for Christmas that night. I almost walked past you on that bench. They're so brave. Vivian's voice was thick with tears. Those little girls, they've been through so much and they're still brave enough to love. They learned it from losing. So did you. So did I. It doesn't make us weak. It makes us strong enough to try again. She looked at him, this man who had come after her when she was too scared to come to him. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Just come home. The word hung in the air. Home. As if his house, his family was where she belonged. She packed a bag that night. She was going with him. When they walked through the front door, the girls were waiting in the living room, literally bouncing with anticipation. The moment they saw Vivian, they launched themselves at her with screams of joy. The reunion was a tangle of arms and tears on the living room floor. Vivian held both girls tight, crying into their hair, while they clung to her like she might disappear. Promise you won't leave again? Rose asked, her voice muffled against Vivian's shoulder. Vivian pulled back, kneeling to be at their level. She looked at each girl, then up at Garrett, then back at the twins. I promise, she said. I was scared. But I'm not going to let being scared take away the best thing that ever happened to me. Ring shopping with two opinionated 7-year-olds was an experience Garrett would never forget. It was November, nearly a year since the night he had found Vivian crying on that park bench. The anniversary was approaching, and Garrett knew exactly how he wanted to mark it. It needs to be sparkly. Lily declared, her nose pressed against the jewelry store display case. But not too sparkly, Rose corrected. Vivian likes simple things. Elegant. The jeweler, an older man with kind eyes and infinite patience, hid his smile behind a professional mask. Perhaps something with a colored stone. Something unique. Rose's face lit up. Blue. Vivian loves blue. Like the sky. They settled on a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. The center stone was the deep blue of a winter evening, the diamonds catching light like stars. Sapphire like the sky. The night we found her, Lily said solemnly. And diamonds like the Christmas lights. She's going to love it. Rose breathed. She's going to say yes, right? Lily asked nervously, suddenly uncertain. Garrett knelt down to their level, taking a small hand in each of his. I hope so, baby, she will, both girls said with absolute certainty. She has to. They planned it for Christmas Eve. Exactly 2 years after the night that had changed everything. Back to the park. Back to the bench. Full circle. The day arrived cold and clear, with a sky full of stars and a fresh dusting of snow on the ground. The Christmas lights were up again, transforming Riverside Park into a winter wonderland, just like they had 2 years before. Garrett was a wreck. He had the ring box in his pocket and kept touching it compulsively, making sure it was still there. His hands were shaking. His heart was racing. He had faced presentations in front of hundreds of engineers, overseen the construction of bridges that spanned raging rivers, but nothing had ever terrified him like this. The girls, by contrast, were practically vibrating with barely contained excitement. This is it, Lily whispered loudly to Rose as they walked through the light displays. This is the night. Shh, Rose hissed back. You'll give it away. Vivian, walking beside Garrett with her arm through his, looked at the twins with fond suspicion. "You two seem extra energetic tonight. We're just excited about Christmas," Lily said, her innocent expression not fooling anyone. They wound through the familiar paths past the giant Christmas tree and the reindeer made of lights and the fountain that had been turned into an ice sculpture. Finally they reached the oak tree, its branches strung with the same white lights that had illuminated the night Garrett first saw Vivian. The bench was there just as it had always been. Vivian sat down, pulling the girls close against her. The cold had turned her cheeks pink, and snowflakes were catching in her blonde hair. She had never looked more beautiful. 2 years ago tonight, she said softly, looking around at the lights, the snow, the perfect Christmas scene. I was sitting right here completely broken. And we found you, Lily announced proudly. You did. Vivian's voice was thick with emotion. You saved my life that night. You and your sister and your father. You showed me that I could still be happy, that I could still belong somewhere. The twins exchanged a look. This was the moment. We have a question to ask you, Rose said, suddenly serious. Before Vivian could respond, Garrett moved. He knelt in the snow beside the bench and her eyes went wide. Her hands flew to her mouth. 2 years ago, Garrett began, his voice shaking with emotion. My daughters saw a stranger crying alone on Christmas Eve, and instead of walking past, they offered to lend her their father. He pulled out the ring box, opening it to reveal the sapphire sparkling in the Christmas lights. Tonight we're asking if you'd like to keep him. Keep us. Permanently. The twins moved closer, one on each side of him, their faces shining with hope. A family asking to become official. 4 people who had all known loss, all known grief, all survived things that should have broken them. You came into our lives wearing a red dress and tears, Garrett continued. You showed me that loving again isn't betraying Claire. It's honoring the promise I made her. You showed my daughters that hearts can expand to hold more love without losing what was there before. You showed yourself that you deserve happiness even after loss. Vivian was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. Vivian Cross. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife? Will you choose this messy, imperfect, beautiful family and let us choose you right back? For a moment she couldn't speak. She was nodding frantically, her hand still pressed against her mouth, her whole body shaking with sobs. Yes, she finally managed. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The twins shrieked with joy, throwing their arms around her. Garrett stood taking her left hand in his trembling fingers, sliding the sapphire ring onto her finger where it caught the Christmas lights and sparkled like a promise. Then they were all wrapped together, 4 people holding on to each other in the snow while the Christmas lights twinkled around them. A crowd had gathered, Garrett realized. Other families had stopped to watch, had witnessed the proposal, had seen this beautiful moment unfold. Among them was Mrs. Dorothy, bundled in a winter coat, holding her camera. The twins had told her the plan days ago. The applause washed over them, but Garrett barely heard it. All he could see was Vivian's face, radiant with joy, and his daughter's beaming smiles, and the feeling that everything in his life had led to this exact moment. We're going to be a real family now, Lily exclaimed. We already are a real family, Vivian said, her voice thick with emotion. We have been for a long time. Garrett pulled her close, kissing her as snow began to fall harder around them. The girls bounced and cheered. The crowd applauded. The Christmas lights twinkled like stars come down to earth. I never thought I'd have this again, Vivian whispered against his lips. A family. People who love me. A place to belong. You always had a place to belong, Garrett said, holding her tight. Right here, with us. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms and the promise of new beginnings. The wedding was small, just as they both wanted. No grand venues or hundreds of guests. Just close friends, Mrs. Dorothy Garrett's parents who had flown in from across the country, and Vivian's aunt, the only family she had left. The ceremony was held in a garden venue, surrounded by roses in full bloom. Claire's flower, a tribute and a blessing. The twins were flower girls, dressed in matching pink dresses that they had helped choose. They had practiced walking down the aisle for weeks, treating it with the seriousness of a military operation. When the moment came, they walked together, scattering petals, with careful precision, their faces bright with joy. Then the music changed, and Vivian appeared. She wore a simple white dress with a blue sash, the twins' suggestion. Her bouquet held roses for Claire and lilies for her mother. She walked herself down the aisle, honoring the strength that had brought her here, the years of survival that had made her ready for this happiness. When she reached Garrett, tears were streaming down his face. "You're beautiful," he managed. "Good tears," she whispered, echoing the words that had become their language. He laughed through his sobs. "The best kind." The officiant spoke about second chances and found families, about love that grows in broken places, about the courage it takes to choose happiness after loss. When it came time for the vows, Garrett went first. "Vivian, I promise to love you for all that you are and all that you've survived. I promise to honor Claire's memory while building new memories with you. I promise to be your partner, your best friend, your home. I promise to remind you every day that you deserve this happiness, that you are not a burden or a liability, but a gift." Vivian's turn. "Garrett, I promise to love your daughters as my own, to be patient when they test my limits and fierce in my protection of their hearts. I promise to talk about Claire with respect and gratitude, to keep her memory alive for the girls who bear her legacy. I promise to stay even when I'm scared, to choose love over fear, to let this family teach me every day how to be brave." They exchanged rings, simple gold bands that matched symbols of the circle of love they had built. And now, the officiant said with a warm smile, "I believe there's a special part of the ceremony." The twins stepped forward, suddenly shy, in front of everyone watching. "Who gives this woman to be married?" the officiant asked. Lily and Rose looked at each other. Then together they spoke the words they had practiced. "We do, because she chose us and we choose her." The guests dissolved into tears. Vivian dropped to her knees, pulling both girls into a fierce hug. "I choose you," she whispered against their hair, "every day, forever." When she stood again, the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Garrett kissed his bride while their daughters cheered and the small crowd applauded, and somewhere he knew Claire was smiling too. The first dance was simple, swaying together to a song about coming home, about finding where you belong. Halfway through, the twins insisted on joining. The four of them danced together in a circle, laughing at their lack of coordination, not caring at all. Mrs. Dorothy captured everything on her camera, crying happy tears of her own. Later at the reception, Vivian's aunt pulled her aside. "Your parents would be so proud," the older woman said, her eyes bright. "Michael and Sophie would be so happy for you. They would love this family you've found." Vivian felt the familiar ache of missing them, but it was softer now, gentled by time and love. "I carry them with me," she said. "Always. But I've learned that carrying the dead doesn't mean I can't hold the living too." 2 years after the wedding, on a perfect Saturday morning in late spring, Vivian woke to the smell of burning pancakes. She smiled before she even opened her eyes, recognizing the familiar scent of Garrett's cooking attempts. From downstairs she could hear giggling and his voice saying something about scraping off the black parts. Her birthday. She had almost forgotten. When she came downstairs in her robe, the kitchen was chaos. Flour covered every surface. Garrett stood at the stove, looking frazzled batter in his hair. The twins were at the table surrounded by art supplies and what appeared to be an explosion of glitter. Surprise! The pancakes were indeed a little burnt, but they were also shaped like hearts, or at least that was the intention. The girls had helped, which explained why some looked more like blobs than hearts. They ate breakfast together at the kitchen table, laughter replacing any concerns about perfectly cooked food. Garrett had covered the burnt pancakes in fresh strawberries and too much whipped cream, and the girls declared them the best birthday pancakes ever made. After the dishes were cleared, the twins grew suddenly serious. "We have presents for you," Rose said, exchanging a significant look with her sister. They presented 2 handmade cards, clearly the result of hours of careful work. Lily's card showed all 4 of them holding hands in front of their house, with the sun shining overhead and hearts floating in the sky. "Our family," she had written in careful letters. Rose's card made Vivian's breath catch. It was a family tree drawn with the precision of an 8-year-old who had thought very carefully about what she wanted to say. One branch was labeled Mommy Claire in heaven with a picture of a woman with angel wings. Another branch showed Garrett, then Lily and Rose, and at the top in careful letters with an arrow pointing to a stick figure with yellow hair and a red dress was one word: Mom. Vivian stared at the card, her vision blurring with tears. "We wanted to tell you something," Lily said, her voice suddenly soft and serious. Both girls stood together holding hands the way they always did when something important was happening. "You're our mum now," Rose said simply. "Not instead of our first mummy." Lily added quickly, "But you're our mum too." "Our here mum," Rose explained. "The one who shows up every day, the one who reads stories and helps with homework and makes us feel safe." Then together they said the words that shattered and rebuilt Vivian's heart in the same breath. "We love you, Mum. Mum." The word hung in the air like a prayer, answered like a wound healed, like every tear she had ever cried transformed into something beautiful. Vivian dropped to her knees, pulling both girls into her arms, sobbing against their hair. These children, these precious girls who had lost their mother before they could even remember her, were offering her the greatest gift she had ever received. "Thank you," she choked out. "Thank you for choosing me." "Is it okay?" Rose asked, her voice small and anxious. "That we call you Mom?" Vivian pulled back, looking at each girl's face. Lily's freckle near her ear, Rose's thoughtful eyes, the features that blended Garrett and Claire into something entirely their own. "It's everything," she whispered. "You're everything." Garrett knelt beside them, wrapping his arms around all 3 of his girls. 4 people who had all known loss, who had found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful from broken pieces. "Best birthday ever?" he asked softly. Vivian laughed through her tears, holding her family close. "Best birthday ever." 5 years later, the Mitchell family returned to Riverside Park on Christmas Eve, continuing the tradition that had defined their lives. The bench beneath the old oak tree now bore a small brass plaque that read, "Where hope begins again." Lily and Rose, now 11 years old, each held the hand of their 5-year-old brother Benjamin, a surprise blessing, who had arrived 2 years after the wedding and who had his mother's blonde hair and his father's gentle eyes. As they walked through the Christmas lights, the girls told their brother the story they never tired of repeating about the night they found their mom crying on this very bench and decided she needed rescuing. Vivian watched her family navigate through the holiday crowds and felt the familiar warmth bloom in her chest. She still carried her parents, Michael and Sophie, with her, always their photographs in her wallet, their memory in her heart. But the grief no longer drowned her. It had transformed into something softer, a gentle ache that reminded her of how much she had been loved and how much she was capable of loving still. Beside her, Garrett squeezed her hand, as if reading her thoughts the way he always did after all these years together. The twins had been right that December night, so long ago. Nobody should be alone on Christmas, and hearts have infinite room to expand. What started with 2 brave little girls and 4 simple words became a love story that healed 4 broken souls and created a family built not on biology, but on choice. Some families are born. This one was chosen, constructed from grief and hope, and the stubborn belief that love is always worth the risk. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please don't let it end here. Let it remind you that kindness still matters, compassion still changes lives, and hope is never wasted. If you felt something watching this, hit that like button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story that lifts your spirit. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that second chances exist and that love finds us when we least expect it. Your support means everything to us and helps us continue bringing you stories that restore your faith in humanity. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the family you need is the one that chooses you.